agree with them all or not, and I never necessarily agree with the folk that I work with. Without it, we don't go forward. So just, yeah, my real appreciation for the report, the manner in which you've presented it and what you're doing. Jan had a question first up, and then Alice.
Kia ora kōrua. I will concur with Councillor Tony.
I got one too, John.
We don't always agree with one another, but sometimes we do, and on this one we do. So, yeah, thank you for your report. Beautifully written and nice and succinct. And you write in there number 4 about writing the forward for the climate action plan. I really like it, so thank you for that. But just in regards to South Canterbury and your representatives down there, I take it they're getting good support from the staff down there. You have a roster, someone down there looking after them and making sure they have access to ECAN and all that?
Yeah, so we have 2 representatives that are South Canterbury based. We have Messiah, who was previously mentioned, and then maybe Fleming. They both have the support of some of the staff in this room here, so Ross, Zoe, and Ricky. But additionally, they are in contact with Debbie, who works in South Canterbury.
Alice, followed by Oscar.
Kiki mihi apio, kia kōrua, moko kōrero, and me tō mahi. Ai, I roto I te iwaia. It just sounds like you're doing a lot this year, which is really, really cool. I obviously haven't been involved since being on the Rōpū last year, but yeah, you just sound super busy, and it's really cool to see that you're expanding those networks. I think that's something that we've definitely struggled with in the past. So yeah, it's great, Mihi. And my question was around the same sort of thing, around are you getting enough support, and just checking in that if there's anything the council could do to support and the councillors, and I guess just checking in really, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, awesome. Kia ora, appreciate that. I think we're all feeling very supported. We have our bi-monthly council liaison meeting coming up soon, which is always really good. So yeah, we're feeling quite well.
Oscar, followed by Nook.
Sorry, I kind of don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say a few words because I'm not going to be around this table probably. There's a chance not again. So I just wanted to note from starting off in what must have been like 2019 now, how it's so good to see a group, especially a youth Rōpū, where it's volunteering and the sort of continuity that this one has. I think it says a lot to the ability of staff and the young people who are putting their names forward to be on it, that it hasn't kind of dropped off. And if councillors did look around at other youth councils in Waikaha, they just die and then they kind of come back to life 5 years later because someone's really passionate, and then never any continuity. So the fact that you're still here, the mahi's increasing, there's institutional support now, and there's an expectation that ECAN will support you and continue to support you, is so cool. So I just wanted to say thank you for volunteering your time, because it is like an opportunity cost of that always. I hope you feel that you're gaining the skills that I know I did, and keep up the mahi, because it's just sick and it's so good to see, and I think it's real optimistic and a nice feeling to hear about all these things being done and all these things being achieved. It's real cool. So thank you.
Look.
Mihi atu kia kōrua, mō tō Rōpū Whakatau. Thank you for your presentation, which I actually heard on the way in. But one of the things, and we love your work, I mean, I do. I mean, you're doing a great job, and that's what it's all about, particularly around us leaving legacies and successions and all of that. My question is, you mentioned that you had some challenges in engagement with Papatū Runanga. Can you kind of highlight the common kind of things that are happening, maybe across the board?
Yeah, kia ora. Mostly, one of the things that we find is that a well-known fact is that Māori is systemically disadvantaged in a lot of ways, and so we often find it really hard to reach out to mana whenua in the first place. We definitely have contacts within like staff and then also with members on our Rōpū, but actually getting a hold or like we have the potential to have up to 5 mana whenua reps on our Rōpū, and we have a mana whenua co-chair. So one of our co-chairs is can be Māori, can be Pākehā, can be anything. The other co-chair has to be mana whenua. And part of that is obviously our belief in the need for that voice. But we find that this year we only have 3 mana whenua reps. And so it's just getting these opportunities out to people is probably our biggest challenge. And we find that with just young people as a whole across the board. But we just have a particular focus with mana whenua because we believe in the value of their voice.
So with, within what you just said around, there needs to be one mana whenua that's mandatory, to actually be representative as a co-chair, and is that widely known actually amongst people?
Not to my knowledge. It's something that we brought in last year. So Stacey Tepuhue Rose was our co-chair, was our mana whenua co-chair last year, and then Jolie Sargenson is our co-chair this year. But I couldn't tell you whether or not it's widely known.
I mean, my point is that it probably needs to be amplified because in that actually being mandatory, then there's a real important responsibility there that mana whenua actually adhere to that. And it's more about, it could be that it needs to be communicated, probably as I say, amplified, as to the responsibility of mana whenua. And that's not unique just in your organisation. That is actually quite common. And the fact is that these are what we put down because we want to acknowledge the input of mana whenua. But it's really good that mana whenua actually know that, intricately. Okay, kia ora, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's one of the, I think, totally agree with all of that. And that's, I think, one of our big goals with, obviously, our priority one being strengthening that connection with Te Matuia and Papatūānanga. So, yeah, kia ora.
Any further questions or thoughts or comments? I'm not going to break it up and just step away and all the rest of it. Grant?
I have a comment. I really thank you very much for your report and all the good work you do. I just wanted to pick up on bullet point 2 on item 11 on page 223, which talks about one of the purposes and goals of the Rōpū is to ensure that young people know how they can make a difference and understand making a difference and that can develop into actually making a positive change. I was on lucky enough to be on the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan hearings panel, and a direct result of a day of submissions from youth in schools at Canterbury University resulted in a new direction being put into the Spatial Plan 5.5, which was that urban growth occurs in locations and patterns that protect strategic regionally and nationally important tertiary institutions. Because quite a few of the conversations we had was about transport and the difficulty that students have getting from A to B, where institutions are not necessarily in the heart of the city, Lincoln and things like that. So that was really useful. It's 25,000 tertiary students, and as you say, I'm not sure of the figure, 60% travel by bus and public transport. And we felt that it was important going forward for our future that was recognised and basically, the text says something along the lines of tertiary research institutes need to be provided for and protected as these institutions are providing the skilled workers of the future, as well as key drivers creating and adopting innovations and providing more sustainable ways for our communities and business to operate. So that's a really good positive outcome from the kind of Mihi that you and other youth around Canterbury actually intend to. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Any further thoughts or comments? If not, my final one is keep your work up, keep challenging us, keep challenging us as individuals, make our life uncomfortable and get us into a space where we continue to think we will not necessarily agree, but without that challenge and without discourse, we don't go forward. So yeah, really appreciate the report you've brought up to us today. And could I have someone please then note the priority areas and to receive the Youth Rōpū's quarterly update report. Nook and Oscar, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We now move back to item 8.2, Q3 work programme update. Grant, was this where you were asking some questions of matters? Taff might just make a comment. We have looked for staff to come in and give some answers, but Taff will give a comment as to what the future might look like on some of them. Yes, please. Just
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, following the comments came through from Councillor Southwark as well in her absence and yours around the compliance space. So due to a number of unforeseen circumstances with senior staff who could answer those questions in the committee and further questions are not available today. Having said that, they did advise me that they will be bringing back a full briefing on compliance and all matters up to date, but also what the future programme looks like, seeing that there was a lot of discussion around the long-term plan and what the compliance space would look like. So that will be coming in the next few weeks, which might help answer a lot of those questions.
thanks. I just thought bring that forward rather than get into ask questions and not get answers. So welcome, Jessie and Emma, please. But still ask you questions if you wish. I'm just preempting, not get an answer.
Good afternoon, councillors. Jessie and I are here together to present the Q3 programme update report. This covers the two portfolios, regional and strategic leadership and climate change and community resilience portfolios. There's a very broad range of work programs within these two portfolios, as we've talked about, from consenting and compliance through to our work around our regional leadership and advocacy, and then the comprehensive climate change program. So there's reports on both the levels of service and the key initiatives under those portfolios. I won't go through them all, but just to highlight the exceptions. So under regional strategic leadership, with exception to those areas around consent processing and compliance monitoring, all other levels of service and key initiatives are on track. Within the climate change and community resilience portfolio, there are two levels of service that have been identified that won't be achieved, and that is to prepare the draft Canterbury Regional Coastal Plan. There has been some discussion of that as part of developing the long-term plan, and the other level of service which is now shifted to not being achieved is to initiate the scheme reviews in accordance with our 30-year infrastructure strategy. So those are the exceptions that we've highlighted as not being on track on. Otherwise, the programs of work are on track, and we are happy to take questions.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kaplan, for advising that the key staff member was away what I'd like to do though is just put the questions that I was going to, and maybe they could be answered as part of the report later on, just for the record, really. My questions are similar to those that were put in an email from Councillor Southworth, I think it was yesterday as well, so it's in the same sort of vein. Really related to, one of them related to page 25, item 14, where it talks about monitoring requirements for priority consents. And I was keen to know where these consents are geographically. What kind of consents are they? It sounds like they're very complex, but I don't really know what the complexity is about. And also in that one, because of the complexity, do we fully recover our costs for that? So I understand, so you don't have to answer that. The second question I was going to ask was, I'll ask this item 15 on the same page, where it does talk about the some of the history of non-compliance for some people who are known non-compliance in the consenting process, and just wondered then, do we issue fines, prosecutions, abatement notices for those particular people as well? Question about item 16 on page 26. There's effectively of the consents that we monitored and are graded, about 9% have been found to be moderately or significantly non-compliant. Well, that's nearly 200 consents, and so just a bit of an update about what are they, and again, where are they? What's the state of those particular consents? Item 25 on page 27. I was keen to understand. It talks about the 1.46 million favourable forecast to the budget, but in the variance it talks about the variance in terms of those two, the Leading the Flood Resilience Program, and the issue about contamination remediation work. And I just wondered if someone could come back and give an indication of the proportions of those two, of that total figure. That would be useful as well. So it sounds like it's actually rapidity versus the contamination. I don't know where contamination is. So that's really my main two questions.
Thank you. I think Jesse has an answer to some of it. Sweet. Sorry.
Through Mr. Chair, yeah. So, sorry, just since we had the run through this morning, I've been chasing a bit of an answer on this one. So I don't have all the proportions as such in terms of the funding, but I understand there are some contaminated land investigations on some of VCAN's land holdings that need to be undertaken. Some of the physical works around removing the contamination has been put on hold while there's a strategic approach to which sites are priority over others. And so some of the budget hasn't been spent at this point in time, so that's the variance that you are seeing in that respect. And there's some further other planning work that needs to be undertaken, and some other smaller scale projects as well. So there is a bit more detail that sits in behind that, which I can chase for you as well and send through to governments if you like as a response to that question. So but that's broadly where that sits in terms of the response.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments over here? Councillor Mihi.
Thank you, through your chair. My questions relate to points 11 and 12, and it's really just, I guess, as a committee of the whole at this stage, getting an update from staff on where we are. I know this is a Q3 report, but there's been 2 months since the end of Q3 report, where we are around consent applications. Are we there? Yep. So just wanting a bit more of an update around where we are on the legacy consent applications, say to the end of May. Hopefully staff, well, I understand staff are keeping those sorts of records. also the times, what was it, the 18% around the time frame for decisions, which is over the whole, all our consenting, and then around the in point 12 where we actually refer to completeness of application checks. So I want to let you know what those time levels are now down to.
Thank you. I believe there are some answers to some of it in the room.
Thank you through you, Chair. Yes, I can answer, but it's around 11, and we'll bring back the ones around 12. So, essentially, where we've got to date. So that figure of the 18.8% of consents being cleared in the statutory timeframe, so councils are well aware because of the legacy ones that are sitting in the backlog. We've also got some on very long timeframes, and that's skewing our numbers. So overall, we're now at 23%. So we are creeping the right way from 16 to 18 to 23. So that's still moving in the right direction. But obviously, we've now got these much older ones, which will continue to skew the numbers. In terms of the ones from 1 December, so what we're considering, I guess, current consent applications, we're still sitting at about 70% of those are going through on the statutory time frame. So things are moving, and the team have now passed the 50% milestone of clearing the backlog consent. So they're now hopefully in the downhill slope. What they have asked me to pass on though is that we are now left with some very gnarly, quite old consent applications. So those numbers would stay skewed when we're looking at the overall numbers for some time, and those ones are quite difficult to move, but they are moving.
Thanks, Dan. Dion, question.
You kind of touched on it before, and it just sparked my memory from reading it around the financial part. Financials in the climate change community resilience work program, which is 1.46 million surplus. I just wanted, I know that in point 26 you discussed the reasons for that, which is what you were saying around like you said, to council each start online around but my question relating to that is, will that catch up, or is that going to be an ongoing underspend? And if we're underspending, one of my bugbears is rating for something that we're not delivering. So is there any risk of ongoing rating for things that we're not delivering? Where's that money going to be absorbed?
Through Mr. Chair, I don't have that answer in front of me. That would be caught up by year's end. I'll need to find the details. That's the emails this morning with staff that are again out of the office as well. So just trying to that underspend of whether we catch up on that or not, and I'll provide a more comprehensive response, if you like, back through governments to councillors on that matter. Yeah, I stand at that information.
Any further questions or comments on these matters? If not, then could we bring the resolutions up to the screen, please? That we receive the work program report for the Q3 2023-24 of the Regional Strategic Leadership Climate Change Committee. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Grant Hedge. Seconded. Councillor Mihi. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We move now to item 8.3, Climate Action Planning Update, and invite Maureen Butler to the table. We meet again. All yours.
Tēnā koutou. Well, this privilege report provides an update on the climate action planning work by Environment Canterbury. So first we have the Canterbury Climate Partnership Plan, which lays out how Canterbury intends to work together, Canterbury Council, intends to work together and with others to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change and to support our transition to a thriving, climate resilient, lower emissions region. And so currently this plan is being tabled at all of the Canterbury councils for feedback and support. All councils briefed to date have expressed their continued support for the plan and the proposed climate actions. And next steps include factoring in the outcomes of individual councils' long-term plan budget deliberations, which will influence the final list of of actions and the implementation approach for inclusion in the final plan. And then secondly, we have the Environment Canterbury Climate Action Plan, and this will identify and collate actions that Environment Canterbury is taking to reduce the risk of climate change to Waitaha Canterbury, including through reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And currently this is at a stage of seeking final feedback from Environment Canterbury councillors, and after integrating feedback from various sources as described in the report. Next steps for the Environment Canterbury plan will be to finalise this and table this at the Environment Canterbury Council in September.
We have had briefings this morning. Do councillors and others have any questions as to this report? No comments? Thank you very much then. Everyone must have been well informed earlier in the day. Then I will ask, we have the resolutions on the screen or in front of you, that we receive the updates and that we support the next steps identified in the process. Can someone please move? Thank you, Yayan. And seconded, Claire, and I just note that that goes over the page and that item too. All those in favour, please say aye. Or do you want to comment? Yes.
I just wanted to congratulate the staff and the people who have been working on both of these documents that we saw this morning. They're pretty impressive, great graphics, easy to read, and it gives a really good narrative, some actions and some implementation guidance, which make it very clear about the way forward. So it's going to be good to see that final outcome from the feedback that other councils get.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Edge. Councillor East.
Thank you. I spoke briefly to the council earlier on, and I'd just like to make some comments here, and firstly thank the staff for the information they've presented today. I'd also like to acknowledge that our climate is changing. However, we declared a climate change emergency 7 years ago, and I'd pose the question, what dramatic change has happened since then? We've had a number of extreme weather events that could be an endorsement of a climate change emergency. Some would say that's cyclical. I would reference to NIWA weather events reporting, which has a number of gaps in it, and there were 2 or 3 storms in the late 1880s that were in excess of Cyclone Gabriel. Sea level rise is remaining reasonably stable at the moment at 2 to 2.5 millimetres a year, and the accelerated rate is something like 0.03 of a millimetre per year. With respect to gases, I've read extensively, and there's an Australian professor of geology that has done a lot of work on climate change, and he and some of the geological work has concluded that there was actually more carbon in the atmosphere in Roman times than compared to today. Carbon dioxide is what makes our world survive. It's good for agriculture and good for the economy. So my concerns really, I think, are threefold. One, we seem to promote a very alarmist, negative, pessimistic messaging around climate change. We're breeding a generation of young kids that are growing up in an atmosphere that there's not much future for us, because the world's not going to survive. Youth suicide's increasing, and I've put a lot of that down to some of the things that are being taught today. Secondly, I'd just like to emphasise again, there's no referencing in any climate change action plans to the fact that all the modelling is predicated on RCP 8.4. And finally, I'd just like to sort of look at the final constraints that we have at ECLAN, and I'm cognizant of the fact that we're spending huge amounts of money on climate change planning and policy. And I would ask the question, would some of this money be better spent on adaptation initiatives? But I won't be supporting the motions that put before us today.
Thank you, Councillor East. Any other thoughts?
After that, I might have a say. I wasn't going to, but I have a lot of respect for my colleague across the table, but sometimes we agree to disagree, which is the great thing about democracy. But my big thing around, and actually I just wanted to say thank the staff who actually put this together. The documents are good. They're a good place to start, and these are iterative things that will ultimately, what's it called? Living documents. So they'll evolve as we evolve. You know, I agree there is some science out there that we might disagree on and might agree on, but the simple fact is that human-induced activities are changing our planet, and that's a fact. And we need to be able to mitigate against some of the challenges that we face in there. And food security and living is one of the biggest things that we face at the moment, and challenges that we face. And I think we need to actually just own up to those things and get on with it, which is what I think this is, you know, working towards, which is a good step, in my opinion. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. I could keep going on and on and on, but I'll just say that. I'll just say that.
Thank you, Councillor Sweets. No further thought. Oh, sorry. There you go. No.
Thank you. Look, I too actually co-took Councillor Sweets' last sort of comments, particularly towards Councillor East. I mean, when we're looking at climate change, and I hope our two youth representatives wouldn't feel uncomfortable with that in some ways. If you've got a comment, by all means, put it out there. But when we look at Mātauranga Māori and their really significant view of the taio under the auspices of Te Māori, there is definitely you know, indicators that have actually caused red flags to go up everywhere. And that is actually based on the Te Māori, the Māori world view around the environment. And so what Māori tend to believe is that it is what it is. And when we actually measure under, for instance, our mahinga kai, and the degradation actually of our mahinga kai areas, that to us is actually an indicator that things actually are not right, that things have actually changed. And even when you look at our history was an old history, and that's another significant point, because there were stories that were told around areas that are not there anymore, for the want of a better word, because of climate change. And so, you know, there's a lot of kind of different. I respect everyone's view on this climate change kōrero, but I just wanted to put mana whenua one there, is that generally, and our former kaipaka haere, at least Tumahai, is very much involved in that whole climate change strategy, you know, for the iwi and with the iwi. And I see that they haven't come back yet, even though Craig, as our deputy chair, acting chair, I see here is that he's going to share the public industry report. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of response that is. But thank you. I mean, open to everyone's view. That is in some way Te Māori's view. Thank you.
Yes, kia ora. I also protocol is to Councillor Sway. I just think it's probably, I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you look around, like the motu, that climate change and climate action is an important thing for youth around the country. I think the climate strike evidence of that. And yeah, I don't think I've got much to say because I feel like for me, it seems pretty clear the direction we're headed if we don't take action, and that the argument that, well, we didn't do something 7 years ago, so why should we do it now? I think, well, maybe we need to get started today. We should have gotten started yesterday. Like, that is sort of the call that's happening around the country from our youth. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I think Oscar would be agreeing with that one. I would, yeah, I'd just say it seems like a pretty important kaupapa for our generation, and moving forward for intergenerational action to be addressing action from the planet. Yeah.
Good, Alice. Thank you for that. As a mover of this motion, obviously 7 years ago, along with myself, with Councillor Mackay, voted for the climate. I mean, emergency. You didn't, but you were there. Councillor Scott was there, and I mean, it hasn't happened overnight, but the decision we made back then, because we were the first council to go to climate emergency, has created a pathway not only for our youth Rōpū to come through and actually have the foreword on our plan itself. We've been talking about before that there's emotive language, but just read it here. Climate change is here. We are watching that destruction down cities, regions, and countries every day. We're watching destroy people's livelihood, their homes, and their way of being. Thinking about our friends and relations up in the Hawke's Bay. They're probably living kind of flick through it, so they actually know what that looks like. And then having the Mayoral Forum agree on an action plan for climate change, 7 years ago would have been heard of. We're working through that. People have seen, I mean, look at Ashburton itself. They kind of, looking at the rainfall they had, a couple of more mils, and that would have been, Ashburton would have been there today. So, I think climate change is real. And we heard Alice talk about it. And just acknowledging Councillor Kōrako, our taiao, our mahi kai, is kind of showing that it's what climate change has done. But also not only that, but our marae and our urupa, just taumatu runanga, their urupa and their whare, they really have to look at retreat where they're going to go, and also down in Moiraki. They wouldn't have chosen that past site and that urupa if they knew 200 years later that it would end up in the sea. But that's climate change. So, kia ora.
Thank you, Gail. Any further thoughts? No, I did not vote for our climate emergency. I was there, but absolutely a strong belief in mitigation and adaptation and the way forward. So emotive language and slogans are not me. It's not what we say, it's actually what we do and what we put in place to achieve the outcome. So that was just me going, I'm not interested in emotive language. I really want to know what we are doing, how we're going to do it, and what we will achieve in that space. So we have a mover and a seconder. No further conversation. All those in favour of receiving and noting what we have in front of us, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We now, you'll vote recorded against Councillor East. Yep. Cool. We shall do that. We now move to item 8.4, greenhouse gas emissions in Canterbury 2018-2021. And to the table, put my glasses on, and then I can see Angie Scott, our science team leader, and Tim Davey, it would appear. I can see you, Tim. You're struggling with the slow form of the other person.
Kia ora, Chair, and kia ora koutou councillors. I wanted to introduce Dr. Angie Scott to you, who you may not have met before, Angie is the team leader of the air quality team in the science group, and it's Angie who has been working on this piece of work and commissioned the work and has pulled it together. And I'll hand straight on to Angie.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, yeah, I'm Angie Scott. What we wanted to do today was just give you a bit of an update on where we're at with our emission inventory, and in particular the publication of the first report that comes out of that work. The emission inventory work we were doing was looking at trying to establish baseline greenhouse gas emissions for Canterbury, across Canterbury at different scales, and also bring in local air pollutants as well, so that we have the ability later on to be able to consider impacts on greenhouse gas emissions as well as air quality emissions. And also because we do these inventories as part of our general air quality work anyway. We commissioned a consultant, and we've been working with that consultant over a period of time to develop this particular inventory. It was a bit different to our local air pollutant inventories because of the way that you classify the different emissions. It's into different categories. So we use what's called the global protocol to compile our inventory. And that's a method that's used for most of the regional and TA type inventories across New Zealand. It's used globally as a global protocol, so it's very, very commonly used. So this was used to generate the emissions, to calculate our emissions. And the outputs of this particular inventory is, the first one is the one that we are tabling here, which is the regional report, and it focuses on the greenhouse gas emissions only, and it includes emissions for the different TAs as well. So we've already spoken to the TAs about that, so they're quite aware of this too. So it's got information that's useful for them, as well as for us. And then there's going to be a second piece of work that's looking at more focusing on the urban areas where a lot of mitigations will happen. So that is a piece of work that's going to be published later this year. So that will come out. So yes, it's really just about the first report, and the primary purpose of doing the work was so that one, we have that baseline of the emissions across the region, and then so we can look at how are the emissions changing over time. We can track those emission changes. We can see the impact of different local and government policies on emissions as well, and also look at mitigation measures and what sort of impact they might have on greenhouse gas emissions as well as the local air polluting emissions. So that's essentially what we've done. And yeah, if you have any questions, please.
Grant, followed by Councillor East, followed by Speaker.
Thanks, Andrew, for that. Just a question that I'm thinking it might actually be in the inventory document that you've published. My question is related to page 50, item 13, where you give some figures of main sources of greenhouse gases. One of them is agriculture at 61% and transport at 18%. Does your inventory break those figures down? So transport, freight versus domestic versus petrol versus petrol, and agriculture is repairing versus cattle versus other types of agriculture, cropping or whatever. You go into that level of detail?
We do go into a level of detail when calculating the emissions. So, for example, say with the agricultural emissions, in the inventory itself, we have we'll publish numbers in there for livestock and animal housing. That will be one line in the inventory. Then there's some associated land and also with fertiliser use. So they're the three components that are actually in the inventory. But behind those numbers, there will be, for example, we'll have the number of livestock numbers, so the number of cattle versus sheep and chicken and all that sort of stuff. So they are used to calculate the emissions that are produced in the inventory itself. And then in terms of transport, so we'll have it split by, I think we've got aviation, road transport, rail and shipping. But behind those numbers again is a lot more detail. Like, so we've got, you know, detailed information on petrol vehicles, passenger vehicles versus heavy duty vehicles. Information will be available to people who need it as well. Like TAs are probably quite interested in that. And we go into that sort of level of detail because if we want to look at the impact of different mitigation measures, we need that kind of information to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. There was a question Councillor Mackenzie had this morning in some of our conversations. So we will, I guess, folk will be quite interested in looking at that data just to see where it does. So thank you. Councillor East, followed by Councillor Swinks.
Thank you. Just following up on your comments, Councillor Mackenzie. He also posed the question regarding agricultural emissions as being a gross figure, and there was no consideration of any of the sequestering effects of crops and grasses and things that go on in the agricultural industry. So just confirming, is this a gross or is it a net, or is there any sequestering in the agricultural industry considered that gives you your figure of 61%?
Thank you. These are gross emissions. So for the next inventory, we will be certainly looking at trying to incorporate the sequestration into it. But it's sort of the main focus of this inventory was really, because it is actually relatively new, it's probably the first one I've come across in New Zealand that we've brought in local air pollutant methodologies with greenhouse gas emission methodologies. So a lot of time and effort has gone into establishing the tools that we need in order to calculate the emissions and things like that, and to get the data that we've needed. So we certainly would bring that in for the next iteration of the inventory, but at the present moment in time, these are gross emissions.
Councillor Swinks.
That was pretty much one of my questions as well. The other one that I have is, so I'm hearing like you're counting chickens and pigs and all that as part of the gross emissions on farms.
Yeah, we're not counting them, but we get livestock numbers, so we've got the numbers of those, and then that's used in calculation.
What about humans?
So no. The way that livestock are used is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that it takes livestock and then it has a factor applied for livestock in terms of the emissions. In terms of humans, it's based on the activities of the humans. So it would be to do with transport or waste or something like that. So rather than the amount that is emitted from each individual human, I'll try and be polite, it's talking about the activities of humans. So it doesn't have a, as far as I'm aware, a calculator based on individual human numbers.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about gross emissions, I would have thought we might start looking actually at the whole amount and that would give a better picture of what actually is going on. I mean, the reality is we do fart and burp the same way as a cow does and as a chicken does. And, you know, God forbid, maybe lizards or snails somewhere else out sort of in our forest. So, I mean, it is a genuine question that I think probably if we're looking at gross emissions, you know, it's something that I think maybe we should think about. But the other one that I wanted to ask is this data is really useful, but what I'm quite interested to know is, are other regions doing this type of capturing this data? Are they going to? And then can we use this data to find out efficiencies? Like, for example, like we've got, it's 100,000 cows on the grounds out there and they're emitting XYZ amount of, you know, emissions based on stock numbers, nutrients, loads, all that sort of stuff. And then we can benchmark that against, say, what they're doing in Southland. They might be doing it less efficiently or something like that. Is that how this is potentially going to be done or looked at? Because I'd be quite keen. I mean, that's really useful for data sort of efficiency.
You've probably got this wrong, but the way that it is calculated takes, for example, stock numbers and has a calculator on that. Now that will be the same for Southland as it is for Canterbury. So it doesn't allow for quite what you're talking about, which would really only be possible to do if you were absolutely measuring the emissions, which isn't possible to do. But it does allow for, if there were changes that were known about that were really quite different, you could change that calculator, but it would require some pretty heavy evidence, I guess, to do that.
But I did hear before you were talking about you were measuring how much nitrogen was being used. Did I hear that right? Am I hearing this? Am I interpreting this in my brain somehow? You've got all of that measurements, how much N is being applied to farms or phosphorus and all that, and that has an emission per this calculation. And that is a known data.
That's right, and I guess what that highlights is that there are different ways of doing different parts. So if you're just talking about livestock, then that's a kind of a factor applied based on number. But if you're talking about the fertilizer application, that is based on the amount applied, but again, there's a factor applied to it, a calculation applied to it, and so kind of using the best data we've got for the variables, and then applying some kind of factor to say what would be the actual emissions from it. And sorry, I didn't answer your question before, which was about other regions. Yes, it is starting to be used by other regions, but Angie said we've sort of been leading this about in terms of the way that we've brought it together. And also, the other thing is that within Canterbury, this is split down to the territorial authorities so that they can use these data themselves, both pulling out their area. But it is starting to be done across New Zealand. Wellington may have done it. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah.
I think that a lot of the regions have actually done them. Auckland, Wellington, I can't remember who else, Whakatau. There's quite a few, and they all use the same methodology. Really, the GPC methodology is what we use. And I think in terms of looking at differences over time and how you do things, it'll be like, so if you reduce your livestock numbers, then our emissions will reflect that, and you'd see what would happen versus what someone else might be doing. So yeah, and the purpose of this methodology is so that everyone does it. It estimates emissions in the same consistent way. So we try not to use, say for example, if emissions from our cows was less than emissions from ones in Southland because of something that we're feeding them, that's not really built into the calculation.
It's a real shame, because that's what I would love to know, is actually how do we start using the data that we're collecting so we can actually say what's efficiently working and what's actually not efficiently working, so we can actually start getting to it. And that kind of works in with this net calculation as well. We can actually start getting some really good stuff actually, because I love this, but it doesn't mean much in terms of decision making in terms of what's working and what's not on the ground sometimes. It's very high level.
Through you, Chair. That's right. I think what you're pointing to is that there's no reason why it can't be done, but you'd have to have a very good solid science basis to be able to say that this would change the calculation of this way, and this has been done this way in Canterbury. So if we had that information, yeah, we could be.
Thanks for that, and for Councillor McKenzie's benefit, a number of your questions have been asked, so I'm going to right through it again. The question around background data for agriculture, yes, the individual animal groups are required, and then there's a gross number comes out, and stock housing and the like. So there is a breakdown that can be and will be made available. So that work is sitting there, so it's not just a blanket deal sitting in that space. This is a gross inventory, not a net inventory, but we're advised that the next iteration of the report will be then attempting to bring net inventory in and make the adjustments, so this becomes the benchmark. and also of note some significant work around the urban environment and what the manifestations within the urban environment and what emissions look like in those profiles. So just to give you an idea of those questions that you had previously asked. You have a question now?
Thank you, John. I was just going to make a comment really that until agriculture, until for agriculture, because the only agriculture and forestry, the only industries that actually you should apply a net figure for, because they actually their sole basis of production is taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. No other industries do that, and so while you work on a gross emissions calculation, it's a nonsense. Net it out for agriculture. And when you start doing that, then we'll have some sensible discussions around appropriate policies that address greenhouse gases.
You. Any further questions or comments? No questions, no comments. If not, maybe we put the resolution on the screen. That being that the Regional Leadership Climate Community Resilience Committee notes the publication of the annual greenhouse gas emissions in Canterbury Report 2018-2021. A mover, please. Thank you. Councillor Edge, seconded. Councillor Sweeks. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you for that report, and it gives me some confidence that the next iterations will in fact move forward and start to be a little more granular and provide the information, because I guess some of us do get grumpy when we just see a gross figure and go, how do we give effect? And as a farmer, how do I give effect? What do I do if I just see a gross figure? So as we become more granular and understand that it provides real opportunities for shifts and change. So thank you for that. We now move to 8.5. Correct. Regulatory best practice for quarry dust management literature review. Take it as read. Well, Dion, you want to say something? Thank you, Jess and team.
Kia ora koutou. Just first I'd like to introduce Dominica Silva as a strategy advisor in my team. We may have met her before, but other representatives on the committee haven't. So Dominica's been leading the regulatory best practice for quarry dust management literature review work, and we'll take you through the paper and next steps in the work program here. So I'll hand over to Dominica and support as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with a progress update on the dust work program. I'll take the report as read, but will draw your attention to just some of the key points. The council made a commitment in the 2021 to 31 long-term plan to tackle the ongoing concerns of residents with regard to dust around Christchurch. A series of workshops was held with the community, industry and councils in late 2021 to better understand the community's issues and to identify the roles and responsibilities that form the foundation for managing dust issues. A proposed course of action was developed from these workshops. One of the agreed actions was to undertake a literature review of the regulatory best practice for quarry dust management in New Zealand. Paddle Dalmore Partners was the last year to undertake literature review. The final literature review was received from consultants in March this year. The literature review covers 4 areas: sources and impacts of dust in quarries, regulatory best practice for the control of dust, non-regulatory methods for control of dust at quarries, reducing the emissions of dust from quarries. The literature review also identifies 6 information gaps that could potentially improve the council's understanding on the regulation and management of dust impacts from quarries. The literature review was published on the council's Have Your Say website in May to provide the community with the opportunity to share its views on the literature review, the recommendations outlined in it, and how the council should prioritise its work on dust going forward. The feedback period closes 10 July. Staff will collect the community feedback and present it to council alongside the literature review recommendations and advice on the council's dust work program going forward. It is also important to note that in February, Te Whatu Ora released a revised health statement on the health impacts of dust.
We've got a lot of luck with these today.
Thank you. Revised health statement and how it will impact the dust work program. I'll take the rest of the report as read and happy to address any questions or points of clarification as required, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. We will take the rest read. I know Dion has some burning questions. Hello.
Okay. So one of my questions was in regards to the revised letter from Te Whatu. I understand that there's a bit of work going on behind the scenes with them to have a little bit more closer work with us and them. Can you just maybe talk a little bit about that?
So we're currently working with Te Whatu to understand the revised health statement. As Jesse mentioned this morning, we have a meeting with them next week just to discuss their submission on the literature review and also to gain a bit more understanding of the revised health statement. And once we get a bit more information, we'll come back to you.
I can just add to that. I think the next steps, as noted with the recommendations on the paper, is to bring a formal briefing back to council around this work, and the health discussions will inform that, as will the feedback from the community on the dust literature review. There's been some discussions around getting a peer review of that as well. So all of this work all comes together for us to then brief council and bring forward a work program on this, and that'll be a joint work program with the health sector as well. So I think once we have that discussion next week, we'll know a little bit more. The statement change, we just need to understand the background and context of that in a bit more detail as well.
Thanks. So one of the pieces of feedback that I get a lot, and obviously this revolves around trust in that community about stuff that's done in this industry. So the biggest thing around this is PDP does work for the industry. They've done this before. So for us, there's been a lot of conversations around potential or perceived conflicts in regards to the recommendations that they've given to us. So I just wanted you to give me what your thoughts are on the recommendations that they've put into their report, and whether we can actually do anything with those.
So in terms of PDP's recommendations, they're just information gaps. So we are currently working on recommendations to outline what we prefer. So once we get a bit more information on recommendations, then we'll come back to council in August to outline our preferred recommendation.
Just that, I think that we went through an RFP process for the work when the literature review was put out there for tender. So it's been through a process where we've had conflicts of interest outlined in that process. I think you'd be pretty hard pressed in Canterbury, New Zealand, probably to find experts in this space that haven't worked in different sectors of different points. It has been, I know we've had discussions about potentially getting an external peer review, and we'll consider that as part of this work program approach. As Dominica said, there are a number of recommendations that we agree with in the paper we could take forward, and others that might not be work that we are able necessarily to do either. And that's part of the advice that we'll bring back as a more holistic discussion with council on the work program. So I think we need to factor in the community feedback, as you mentioned as well, and also, as we said before, the health side of things as well. So the quarry industry will also have its own views on this as well, which we'll need to factor into. So there's all different sides to this conversation. It's not a simple conversation. It's been a conversation that's been going on for decades in Canterbury, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. So I think just in terms of that, we need to have all of that information in front of us so that we can put together a good joint work program that we agree on with council, that this is what we're, of course, we're going to take from this, and within the roles and responsibilities that we have as a regional council as well. There will be other things that TAs will be responsible for, health will be responsible for. What other stuff can happen with the quarry industry, or even in the central government level as well. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. It's about actually let's shape that together and
We're done, Dion. Thank you. Not followed by Grant.
Kia ora. No, my question, Grant.
Grant, you have a question? I think you initially you're okay. Any further questions or comments? If not, then thank you, team, for the presentation. I noticed that piece of work that creates real tensions within the communities, and the resolutions are in front of us. For 8.5, there are a whole list of the Regional Leadership Climate and Community Resilience Committee. Notes, and agrees on item 5. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Edge. Seconded, Councillor Sweeks. No further comment. I'll get it right once upon a time.
I mean, there was a few things that I wanted to say, and it's just the opportunity to say it, but they're not really things that I can ask questions of the staff, because it's not fair to ask, questions of the staff for some of these things. But yeah, I do personally have some reservations on the report. I've gone through it quite in depth. It is a good report from the point of view that it does bring together the information, and it does outline what is, but it really looks at it from the lens of industry in a way, which is a bit of a shame. So, and again, this is my personal view when I look at it. There are potential conflicts of interest there, and they are very hard to manage in this country. We have a very few amount of people that look at air quality and take air quality seriously in this country, which is a real shame. And we're starting to see a bit of an attack on air quality. NIWA's just having to cut their air quality team. MFE has a one person or half FTE on air quality. And this is only one part of air quality, but our regulations do not fit. And one thing that I really wanted to hone in on was our ability as ECAM to do much in this space, because we're only one small part of the bigger puzzle. And it's the analysis in the PDP report of the NESAQ. And so the report says, while the NESAQ may be primarily focused on combustion sources, it does not explicitly exclude fugitive dust sources like quarries. However, in other parts of the report, it goes on about NESAQ not being able to deal with quarries. So this really puts down to me the actual issue that we face in terms of what we're dealing with here is the NESAQ. It really is primarily looking at combustion sources and not other, what's the word I'm looking for here, fugitive or consented activities such as quarries. Because a lot of the argument is that, oh, you get a whole lot of dust from, northwest wind and you get a lot of dust off the river. We don't consent it, bloody river. We do consent quarries, and we have conditions to look at these things. So that's where I'm really honing down on. This report does not touch in depth about crystalline silica or RCS. That is a big issue for people, whether it's a real issue or whether it's a perceived issue. It's something that we do need to address, and hopefully Te Whati Water will start taking that up a little bit more. This report doesn't have very much depth analysis. It's a very shallow report. As I said, it touches on about 110 pieces of information, but it doesn't dig really deep into the localised issues that the people have faced because they didn't go and talk to them. There was a literature review, but this is why we're going through that two-stage process of having people there. And that's the other point, inadequate incorporation of community perspectives. The other thing that I find here is that I don't really like with the report is the inefficient recommendations for non-regulatory measures. So the report discusses them, but it doesn't talk about really, it just says education, community engagement, blah, blah. It doesn't actually talk about any of the tools that we could actually use, such as, what are on quarry mitigation strategies next to be done. I really don't want to go down that track when I read the report. So, and then the other thing that I'm really keen on is setbacks. How do we get those things into there when we've got reverse sensitivity issues? This is NESAQ territory again. So we're really limited in all of this stuff, and this report doesn't really go into it in a lot of depth. So I really just wanted to say those things. It was a bit disappointing when I did read the report because these things have not been touched on. So hopefully the community will provide some of this context that backs up some of the bits that are missing from this, and then when we come to having a look at this again, we can then start saying, put in a bit of leadership in this space, because MFE are not doing it. NIWA is now going to be sort of stripped back to doing nothing. So we actually do need to show some leadership in this space, because air quality isn't just about quarry. I mean, this is just one issue, but it faces a whole lot of other things that have just not been addressed. And we as an organisation have a lot of focus on combustion, burners, emissions from farting cows, but we need to be looking at this stuff as well. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Councillor Edge.
I thought it was okay in terms of what it was, which is almost like a reference document. They have obtained information from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and given a general description of various tools that might be required, from high use of water, variable setbacks, reverse sensitivity, those sorts of things. So it does canvas a lot of information, and I suspect it'll be a matter of us having a look more in depth of the report and seeing how we can move forward and do things better, perhaps, than other people around the world.
Thank you. Any further comments, thoughts? If not, then I put the motion that's been moved and seconded. Has it? Yes, John. Get confused. There's a. Oh, I got lost. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. I was ready for that one. We now move to item 8.7, the report from the chair. The chair is not there. I am the chair, but it's not my report. It sounds like something from Dr. Zeus. Are there? I will take the report as read in the first instance. Are there any members of some of those other committees that may wish to comment on joint committee meetings and the like? Councillor Edge.
I just got to comment briefly, Chair, on your comments about 228, page 228 on the Greater Christchurch Partnership. The strategic priorities for the partnership have been discussed for a work program that's been identified as part of that whole process. And so the team are now getting on with the work program, and especially looking at the housing recommendations and the housing action plan. But obviously it's been well received, and so it's something that the partnership will work on and incorporate going forward. We'll certainly it will help inform our RPS process. So yeah, we look forward to hopefully some more involvement again with government for transport and urban development, but we'll wait and see on that one.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else with reports they would like to bring in? If not, I'll touch briefly on the civil defence meeting in the last wee while down in Ashburton. There was a report there, but there was a significant conversation on what the new act might look like, the government's response to the North Island weather event, recommendations that have come out of government as to what a future, I guess, act and responsibilities for NEMA and civil defence might look like. That was followed up with another session with the mayors, and we meet with Minister Mitchell tomorrow to further discuss that. We have also been circulated, I think it's a 20-something page document put together by the SEEC, the regional managers of civil defence, a report back to government and the minister on their views of what is being positive as a way forward. And I guess within those conversations, there's a really strong desire to maintain civil defence as it should be from the ground up, from the street corner, from the riverbank. But how do we fund it from the top down? And so the real challenge is where do we get the funding to make it happen, but maintain that local drive. And some of the initial thoughts that have come out of the North Island event talk about the role of DPMC and NEMA and a very sort of top down. And we can go back to the TAG report of 2017, 19, 18. only a handful of the, I guess, the things that fell out of that have been put into place, and they are things that kind of happen in Wellington. And our view is things that happen in Wellington don't necessarily achieve the outcomes we want. So it's an ongoing conversation. We will be pushing hard to ensure that there's a real balance between the staff within civil defence and some governance to ensure that when the bill kind of lands, we're in a good place, and we're not, like we may have been in the past, having absolute fights with ministers and others about what the future looks like. So that's the civil defence space at the moment. How do we drive it from the bottom, but fund it from the top, and meet the headcount? Any other reports or thoughts on this report? If not, then it brings me to, I guess, item number 4, and thanking Alice and Oscar for your contribution over time. I first met you, Alice, you were driving a yellow or a Ford little car around my farm, following the Waterwise vans, and I thought, well, there's a very environmentally friendly, conscious person, aren't they? You might have still been at school in those days, I suspect, or first year university, one or the other. So, it was the nutrient, the gross feeder. So you look at gross feeders and where the challenges are in nutrients. So that was a great program, Waterwise. I don't know, we probably had about 10 years of it, bringing groups of a mix of I guess, secondary school and first and second year students together in a challenging environment, whether it's folk like me sitting on a dairy farm asking the question, so who pays for your cell phone, who pays for the laptop, who achieves that, what does an economy and a society look like if you don't have production? So for me, it was a really great program. Its demise is gone, and now I think the focus is on Littleton, the harbour, and Rōpū and other places. So it's morphed and moved on. So that was my first connection with Alice and Oscar coming into this space. And I just I do reflect on, I guess, what the youth Rōpū kind of looked like in the get-go when you were guys there, and it was kind of dishevelled and whatever, and a bunch of ideology and crap and whatever. Yep, I'm being honest. But looking to what it is today and the guys that presented, you guys were the forefront of leading that, and then getting a seat at this table and challenging. And I'm sincere in my thoughts about it. Down to you guys and the Rōpū to challenge. Yep. As I say, I may not agree with where you are. You don't need to convince those that are in your echo chamber. You probably don't need to convince the middle. It's convincing others. So it's maintaining and challenging and being part of that conversation of a way forward. So yeah, just finally, thank you very much for your contribution over the years for the Youth Rōpū and with this committee. I am not sure what the future does bring, but I think on behalf of us all, we thank you for your contributions. Anyone else wish to make a comment?
So I'm going to speak. So I think you've done really well, and thanks for accepting to come into this room and speak and all the way here. I think it's a big issue, you guys. Gives you a bit of an insight into here and what this is like, and so that you can then take that story out and say, look, they're not all that scary, because some people think this is a little scary place. So well done to you. As John has said, I don't know what our future brings either. Our community structure is coming up next week or the week after. This is where we're headed. I'm not sure about that. And so I guess that decision will be made then about that. But good luck to you in your futures that you've got ahead of you. And it's been refreshing to have some smiling faces in the table. Rather than grumpy ones. Yeah.
Does anyone else wish to comment? Would you?
And I just reiterate Peter Scott's comment. And interesting thoughts and arguments coming in, and hopefully it gives you a taste that you will be standing in excellence. Hopefully, you want to come here sometime. But no, yeah, Oscar or Alex, I'm sure, if you really want to put your hand up, there's a lot of people who support you if you want to, come onto this table as a full-blown councillor. I think you do an amazing job. So, but we haven't finished yet. We've still got to look at our new structure and where you guys fit in moving forward. And no doubt we'll try and get you back in here in some shape. Thank you for your name.
For that, I'll let you guys have the last word. I just think the progression from when everything started to the presentation today from the youth Rōpū just shows that growth and ability to influence and speak confidence and with some respect. So, Alice and Oscar, final words on this matter.
Kei te mihi o kia koutou, mō tō kōrero me te whakaro I te rā nei. Kei te mihi o kia koutou hoki mō tō tautoko me tō manaaki te au, kia māua I tēnei Rōpū. He tino aro ki au, ki te ako. E pāna te mahi o te Rōpū. He tino nui kaupapa mō rangatahi ki Waitaha, ki Aotearoa, kātua. Mena koutou. Like giving us the space, I guess, to speak and to grow. I think it's definitely a challenging environment, and it's cool to be able to be welcomed and to learn from everyone and from hear from your knowledge as well. I guess the process to get these seats was quite long, and like you've sort of alluded to, Councillor Sunkel, like there were a lot of conversations and coming to this table to just sit in at meetings, and so it was pretty rewarding to finally be at the table too. And just thank you for being able to take part in those discussions and processes. And I guess moving forward, to be really keen to stay in communication about what is available for youth representation in a future space and how that might look, and just reflecting on what went well and maybe what could work better in the future. But thank you.
I think I pretty much am just on the same boat as Alice. This has been a really great experience. It feels, I think it's lucky that all the councillors, whether anyone kind of agrees or not, have been friendly, have been really supportive. Out in the hallway, it's always like a handshake and how you're going, and that's really nice. And I really appreciated that. I thought I should note that I'm a Christchurch Central boy, so don't worry about Selwood. But although I think I have been around, so no. I think it's really great being part of this. I think all these issues are so intergenerational, and I remember speaking when I was on the youth Rōpū and hearing from councillors about how the decisions around the environment are always kind of like 10 years out. Like you make a decision and then you only really see how it ends up with the impact it has 10 years later. And so I think when I've been in this room, that's where my head's been about what life looks like then. So I think you can always have ups and downs and economic turns and different things, but it's important to keep that like long-term outlook, especially when the environment isn't something that ECAN actually has the ability to change in a 3-year term, to be honest, in my opinion. And so, I think I just encourage, hopefully, if we're not around this table again, let our look continue, because I think, like, uniquely, ECAN seems to be a pretty solutions-based organisation in some way that people are actually genuinely looking to do the right thing. And I think being in this room gives you a lot of faith in that and the ability to actually do things in the future. That's cool. Hopefully we'll see you around. So thank you.
Thank you for that. That sounds like an endorsement for a 4-year term. We may get a little bit more done, but who knows? Thank you, guys. A mover and seconder, I would suggest that Alice has moved and Oscar has seconded, being the last meeting of this committee. Is there any further conversation or discussion? If not, I put the motion that you have in front of you, read that we received the chair's report and the associated matters. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. There is item 10, no next meeting. We're done. Well, I prevail upon Councillor Mackay to close for us.
Thank you, Chair.
Kia tau. Kia tātou katoa to ata whai o tō tātou āriki a ihi karaiki me te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tāpu ake. Amen.
Kia ora.